The sound of the slap was sharp, a crack of thunder in the quiet afternoon of Lincoln Park. It wasn't the violence that silenced the birds, but the injustice. Officer Richard O'Malley, his face a mask of contempt, stood over 72-year-old Arthur Peterson, a man whose crime was simply being black on a park bench. O'Malley's badge gleamed, a symbol of power twisted into a weapon of pride. He thought this was just another Tuesday, another lesson taught to someone he deemed beneath him. He didn't know that the frail, elderly man he'd just assaulted had a son who carried a different kind of badge, a federal one, and that son was about to walk into his life and burn it to the ground. The sun on Tuesday, May 14th, was unseasonably warm for the city of Northwood. It spilled over the rooftops, warming the concrete and coaxing the last of the spring blossoms into full, fragrant bloom. For Arthur Peterson, it was a perfect day. At 72, a retired high school history teacher and a widower of 5 years, simple pleasures were his greatest treasures. A warm day, a comfortable park bench, and a well-worn copy of The Souls of Black Folk were the ingredients for a perfect afternoon. Lincoln Park was his sanctuary. He knew the ancient oaks by the patterns of their bark and the squirrels by their particular brand of boldness. He sat on his usual bench, the one with a clear view of the duck pond, and let the warmth seep into his old bones. He was a man of impeccable routine and quiet dignity. His suit, though dated, was clean and pressed. His shoes were shined. He was a portrait of a gentleman at rest. The disruption arrived in a polished black and white cruiser that glided to a stop on the access road, its presence an immediate tear in the fabric of the park's tranquility. 2 officers emerged. The one in the passenger seat, a young man named Kevin Miller, looked barely old enough to shave. The driver, however, was a different story. Officer Richard "Rick" O'Malley was a man carved from cynicism and cheap coffee. He had 25 years on the force, a burgeoning gut that strained the buttons of his uniform, and a belief system forged in the gritty, "us versus them" mentality of the old guard. His eyes, small and hard, swept the park not for beauty, but for trouble. And in his world, a black man sitting alone was, at best, an anomaly, and at worst, a problem waiting to happen. "See that guy?" O'Malley grunted to Miller, jerking his chin toward Arthur. "Let's go have a chat, see what he's up to." "What's the probable cause, Rick?" Miller asked, a hint of unease in his voice. They had received no calls about this area. O'Malley shot him a look of pure disdain. "The PC is, I'm a cop, and he's there. He matches the description." "Description of who?" "Of someone who doesn't belong," O'Malley snapped, already moving. Arthur watched them approach, a familiar, weary sigh escaping his lips. He'd lived through the 60s. He'd been on marches. He'd seen this dance before, in all its ugly variations. He carefully placed his bookmark in his book and set it beside him, folding his hands in his lap. He would be polite. He would be respectful. He would endure. "Good afternoon, officers," Arthur said, his voice the calm, measured tone of a lifelong educator. O'Malley ignored the greeting. He stopped directly in front of the bench, forcing Arthur to crane his neck to look up at him. It was a power move, as old as time. "What are you doing here?" "I'm enjoying the day, officer, reading my book. We've had some reports of loitering in this area. People causing trouble," O'Malley said, his eyes scanning Arthur as if looking for a hidden weapon. "You got any ID?" Arthur's heart sank. Loitering, the classic catch-all excuse. "I live just 4 blocks from here, on Maple Street. I have for 40 years. I am not loitering, I am resting." "I didn't ask for your life story. I asked for ID." O'Malley's voice grew sharper. Slowly, deliberately, Arthur reached into his jacket pocket. His movements were stiff with age, slowed by the arthritis that plagued his knuckles. He produced a worn leather wallet and retrieved his driver's license. O'Malley snatched it from his hand. He glanced at it, then back at Arthur. "Arthur Peterson. So, Arthur, what's in the bag?" He nodded at the small canvas tote bag on the bench, which held a bottle of water and a sandwich. "My lunch, officer." O'Malley smirked at Miller, who stood a few feet back, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Your lunch, huh? Let's see it." This was the moment the line was crossed. It was no longer a routine check. It was harassment, pure and simple. A quiet fury began to smolder in Arthur's chest, a feeling he hadn't truly felt in decades. "With all due respect, officer," Arthur said, his voice losing its warmth and gaining a steely edge. "You have my identification. You have no cause to search my belongings. I am a citizen, sitting in a public park, bothering no one. I know my rights." O'Malley's face darkened. The one thing he couldn't stand was one of them talking back, quoting rights. It was like a personal affront to his authority. "Oh, you know your rights, do you? You're a regular constitutional scholar, old man," he sneered, tossing the license back onto Arthur's lap. "Your right is to do what I tell you to do. Now show me what's in the damn bag before I dump it out myself." Arthur stood up. He wasn't a tall man, and age had stooped his shoulders. But in that moment, he seemed to draw strength from the injustice of it all. He stood to his full height, looking O'Malley directly in the eye. "No," he said, the word clear and firm. "You are abusing your authority, and I will not be a party to it." Miller took a half step forward. "Rick, let's just go. He's just an old man." But O'Malley wasn't listening. His world had narrowed to the defiant old man in front of him. To him, this wasn't about a bag or loitering anymore. It was about dominance. It was about putting this man, and everyone who looked like him, back in their place. "You're not going to comply?" O'Malley's voice was dangerously low. "I am not," Arthur affirmed. What happened next was a blur of motion. O'Malley's arm shot out. It wasn't a punch, but a hard, open-palmed slap. The sound echoed across the pond, a sickening crack that made Miller flinch, and a young woman sitting on a nearby bench gasp, her hand flying to her mouth as she instinctively raised her phone. The force of the blow snapped Arthur's head to the side. His glasses flew off his face and skittered across the pavement. A bright red handprint began to bloom on his wrinkled, dark cheek. For a moment he was simply stunned, the world a dizzying, humming mess. The pain was secondary to the sheer, soul-crushing humiliation. In his 72 years, through all the struggles and indignities, no one had ever laid a hand on him like that. "Now you're under arrest," O'Malley snarled, grabbing Arthur's arm. "Resisting arrest. An assault on a police officer." "Assault?" Arthur stammered, his mind reeling. "You struck me." "You raised your hand to me," O'Malley lied, his voice now booming for any potential witnesses. "He tried to take a swing at me, Miller. You saw it." He twisted Arthur's arm behind his back, the old man groaning in pain as the rusty joints screamed in protest. Miller's face was ashen. He hadn't seen that at all. He had seen his partner, his training officer, assault an elderly man for no reason. But the blue wall was thick and high. "Yeah, Rick," he mumbled, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. "I saw it." As O'Malley cuffed Arthur, pushing him roughly toward the cruiser, Arthur's mind wasn't on the pain in his wrist or the searing sting on his face. It was on one thing, his one phone call. They had to give him one phone call, and he knew exactly who he was going to call. His son, David, the man O'Malley had just unwittingly declared war on. The 17th Precinct Station was a symphony of institutional gray. The walls were gray, the floor was a scuffed gray linoleum, and even the air seemed to carry a gray, dusty weight, thick with the smell of stale coffee, antiseptic, and quiet desperation. For Arthur Peterson, it was a disorienting, dehumanizing nightmare. He was processed like a piece of meat. His pockets were emptied, their meager contents, a handkerchief, keys, $27 in cash, and a book of stamps, itemized on a form by a bored, gum-chewing officer. His belt and shoelaces were taken, a final indignity that made him feel both foolish and vulnerable. He was photographed, his face still bearing the angry red imprint of O'Malley's hand, a detail the camera dutifully captured, but the officer behind it completely ignored. O'Malley, meanwhile, was at a desk in the main bullpen, typing up his report. He was a master of creative writing when it came to these documents. Each sentence was a carefully constructed brick in a wall of lies. Upon approaching the subject, later identified as Arthur Peterson, he typed, "Subject became immediately belligerent and uncooperative. Subject matched the general description of an individual wanted for a series of petty thefts in the area. When asked for identification, subject refused and used profane language. When asked to submit to a lawful search of his belongings for officer safety, Subject stood aggressively and raised a closed fist in a threatening manner. Fearing an imminent assault, I utilized an open-hand redirection technique to create distance. The subject then continued to resist, at which point he was taken into custody. He glanced over at his partner, Miller, who was staring at the wall, his face pale. "Hey, kid," O'Malley said, his voice now friendly, conspiratorial. "You read this over before you sign it. I made sure to include how you provided backup. Looks good for you. Shows you can handle a dynamic situation." Miller felt a wave of nausea. A dynamic situation? An old man with a book? Rick. He didn't raise his fist. O'Malley's friendly demeanor vanished instantly. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Listen to me, and listen close. You are a rookie. I am your training officer. On your report, you will write that you witnessed the subject become aggressive. You will write that you witnessed his threatening posture. You will corroborate my report word for word. Or do you want to spend the next 20 years of your career on midnight shift in the evidence locker? Do you understand me?" The threat was clear, the choice stark. Fall in line, or your career is over before it begins. The infamous blue wall of silence wasn't a myth. It was a foundational reality of this world. Miller, terrified and ashamed, gave a weak, almost imperceptible nod. "I understand," he whispered. "Good boy," O'Malley said, slapping him on the back with a little too much force. "Now go write it up." Back in the holding cells, Arthur sat on a cold concrete bench. The cell was shared with a drunk man muttering to himself, and a teenager picked up for shoplifting who looked more scared than he was. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest. But beneath it, the quiet fury was solidifying into a hard, cold resolve. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a guard appeared. "Peterson, you get one phone call." He was led to a phone bolted to the wall. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed the number he knew better than his own. It rang 3 times before a voice answered, a voice that was the only family he had left. "This is David." "David," Arthur said, his own voice cracking with a mix of relief and shame. "It's Dad." There was a pause on the other end. David Peterson, a man whose life was defined by order and control, could detect the slightest tremor of chaos in his father's voice. "Dad, are you okay? Where are you?" I'm in some trouble, son. I'm at the 17th precinct. I've been arrested." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Charge. David Peterson, special agent in charge of the FBI's Public Corruption and Civil Rights Squad for the entire region, felt a cold dread snake its way up his spine. His father was the most law-abiding, gentle man he had ever known. "Arrested for what?" David asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Resisting arrest. Assaulting an officer." Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. "David, he hit me." The 3 words landed like hammer blows. David closed his eyes, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his phone. He pictured his father, the man who taught him how to read, how to be decent, how to be strong, being struck by a common thug in a uniform. "Dad, listen to me very carefully," David said, his mind already shifting from son to federal agent. "Don't say anything else to anyone. Don't sign anything. They'll probably assign you a public defender for the arraignment. Talk to them, but tell them your son is on his way. Tell them not to agree to any deals. Do you understand?" "Yes, son. I'm on a plane in an hour. I will see you tomorrow morning. We are going to fix this. I promise you." "Be careful, David," Arthur pleaded. "They should have been," David replied, the line crackling with his cold, controlled fury before he hung up. Within minutes, Special Agent David Peterson was a blur of motion. He made 2 calls. The first was to the airline. The second was to a trusted subordinate. "I need you to run a name for me. Officer Richard O'Malley, 17th Precinct, Northwood PD. I want everything. Complaints, commendations, lawsuits, whispers. Dig deep, and do it quietly. Off the books for now." A few hours later, a young, earnest public defender named Sarah Jenkins met with Arthur in a small, windowless interview room. She had a stack of files an inch thick, and Arthur's was just one of them. She read the arresting officer's report with a practiced, weary expression. "Mr. Peterson," she began, her tone gentle but rushed, "I've read Officer O'Malley's report. He's a veteran officer. It's his word against yours. He's alleging you became aggressive and took a swing at him. His partner is corroborating the story. That is a lie, Arthur stated simply. He slapped me because I questioned his authority. Sarah sighed. She believed him. She'd seen 100 cases like this. But belief didn't win in court. I understand, but the prosecutor will likely offer a deal, plead guilty to a lesser charge, maybe disorderly conduct. You'll get time served, maybe a small fine. It's the quickest way to put this behind you. Arthur looked at the young woman and saw not incompetence, but a spirit worn down by a broken system. He remembered his son's words. "Thank you for your advice, Miss Jenkins," he said calmly. "But we will not be taking any deals. We will be pleading not guilty. My son is on his way. He asked that you wait for him." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Is your son an attorney?" "No," Arthur said, a faint, proud smile touching his lips for the first time that day. "He's not." He didn't need to say more. He would let David do the talking. The machine had started grinding, but it was about to catch a gear it never knew existed. David Peterson's flight landed at Northwood International Airport just before midnight. He moved through the terminal with an air of quiet, purposeful intensity that made people instinctively step out of his way. He wasn't physically imposing like Officer O'Malley, but he possessed a coiled stillness, an aura of authority that was earned, not demanded. Dressed in a dark travel blazer and slacks, he looked like a businessman, but his eyes, sharp and analytical, missed nothing. His first stop was not the precinct. It was a 24-hour diner where he met with Sarah Jenkins. He'd called her from the airport, and the young public defender, intrigued and a little bewildered by the strange case that had fallen into her lap, had agreed to meet. She saw him sitting in a back booth, a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him. He stood as she approached. "Ms. Jenkins, David Peterson, thank you for meeting me." His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. "Of course, Mr. Peterson," she said, sliding into the booth. "I'm so sorry about what's happened to your father. I've reviewed the file. To be frank, it's not good. It's a classic he said, she said, but one he is a decorated police officer with a partner backing him up." David nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "Let's talk about Officer O'Malley. What does the courthouse chatter say about him?" Sarah hesitated. "Look, off the record, he has a reputation. He's old school, a bit of a hothead. There are always rumors about guys like him, but nothing ever sticks. The department protects its own." "And his partner, Kevin Miller?" "A rookie, 6 months on the job. O'Malley is his training officer. He'll do whatever O'Malley tells him to do. He's not going to risk his career for an old man he just met." David listened, absorbing every word. He then opened his briefcase and pulled out a slim file folder, sliding it across the table to her. "This is what my office found in 3 hours." Sarah opened it. Her eyes widened. It was a preliminary background check on Richard O'Malley, but far more detailed than anything she could ever access. It listed 3 prior excessive force complaints, all of which had been dismissed internally. It noted 2 civil suits filed against him that were settled out of court by the city for undisclosed sums. It also contained a list of 16 arrests he had made in the last 2 years for resisting arrest, where the initial charge was something minor like loitering or disorderly conduct. A clear pattern of escalating minor encounters into chargeable offenses. "How did you get this?" Sarah whispered, stunned. "My name is David Peterson," he said again, his voice even. "I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My current title is Special Agent in charge of the Civil Rights Division for this region. Officer O'Malley didn't just slap a retired school teacher, Miss Jenkins. He assaulted the father of the lead federal agent responsible for investigating police misconduct." Sarah Jenkins stared at him, her mind racing. The pieces clicked into place. The strange confidence of the old man, the refusal of a deal, the sun flying in overnight. This wasn't just another case. This was a tectonic shift, a lifetime of fighting a losing battle against a fortified system, and suddenly someone had just handed her a bunker-busting bomb. "Okay," she said, a new fire in her eyes. "Okay, what's the play?" "For now, you are his lawyer. I am his son," David instructed. "At the arraignment tomorrow, we do everything by the book. We plead not guilty. We request discovery. But I need you to do one more thing. I need you to file a motion to preserve all evidence, specifically any and all body cam and dash cam footage from Officers O'Malley and Miller, as well as all surveillance footage from Lincoln Park. They'll say the cameras were malfunctioning or weren't turned on, Sarah countered, reciting the standard police excuse. I know, David said. Let them lie. Let them put it on the record. After leaving the diner, David did something else. The initial informal search on O'Malley had flagged a potential witness. The dispatcher log noted a 911 call made from the park around the time of the incident, not to report a crime, but from a woman who was disturbed by an officer's conduct with an elderly man. The caller had hung up before giving her name, but a location ping gave an address. At 1:30 a.m., David Peterson knocked on the door of a modest apartment. A light was on inside. After a moment, the door opened a crack, held by a chain. A young woman in her 20s with wide, frightened eyes peered out. My name is David Peterson, he said softly, holding up his FBI credentials. I'm not here to cause trouble. I believe you were in Lincoln Park this afternoon. You may have witnessed an interaction between a police officer and an elderly gentleman. The woman, Maria Sanchez, looked terrified. I don't know anything. The man's name is Arthur Peterson. He's 72 years old. He's a retired teacher. He's also my father, David said, his voice imbued with a sincerity that was impossible to fake. The officer who arrested him lied in his report. He's saying my father assaulted him. I know that's not what happened, and I have a feeling you know it too. Maria hesitated, then looked past him into the empty hallway. She unlatched the chain and opened the door. Come in. Her small apartment was neat, filled with textbooks for a nursing program. She gestured for him to sit. I saw the whole thing, she said, her voice trembling. That cop was a bully. The old man was so polite, and the cop just hit him. For nothing. Did you happen to record it? David asked, his heart pounding. This was the linchpin. Maria wrung her hands. I did. On my phone. I started recording when the cop started yelling. I got the slap. I got everything. I was going to send it to a news station, but then I got scared. The other cop looked right at me. I thought they might come after me. Ms. Sanchez, David said, leaning forward, you have done nothing wrong. You are a witness to a crime. That video is evidence. If you give it to me, I can personally guarantee your protection. I will make sure your name is kept out of it for as long as possible. But that video can set my father free and ensure the man who did this is held accountable. Tears welled in Maria's eyes. It was the relief of someone who wanted to do the right thing, but was too afraid. She nodded, took out her phone, and with a few taps, transferred the file to a secure cloud drive David had prepared. As he walked out of her apartment building into the pre-dawn chill, David checked his phone. The video file had arrived. He pressed play. The image was clear, the audio crisp. He saw his father's dignity. He heard O'Malley's escalating vitriol. And then he saw it, the brutal, unprovoked slap. The sound was even more sickening on the recording. He watched his father stumble, saw his glasses fly. He heard O'Malley's blatant lie. He tried to take a swing at me. David stopped walking. He leaned against a brick wall, the city's hum fading into the background. A single cold tear of pure rage traced a path down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away. The time for emotion was over. Now it was time for justice. The storm he had been gathering was about to break, and the Northwood County Courthouse was ground zero. The Northwood County Courthouse was a place of hurried transactions and delayed justice. Its air was stale with the weight of 1,000 pleas, bargains, and sentences. Arraignment. Courtroom 3B was the engine room of this machine, a windowless chamber where defendants were processed in a grim, rapid-fire parade. Arthur Peterson sat beside his public defender, Sarah Jenkins, at the defense table. He looked small and frail in his ill-fitting, county-issued orange jumpsuit, the color a stark, brutal contrast to his graying hair and dark skin. The red mark on his cheek had faded to a purplish, ugly bruise, a visible testament to his ordeal. Across the room in the first row of the gallery sat Officer Rick O'Malley. He wasn't required to be there, but he'd come anyway. It was another power move, a way to intimidate his victim. He sat with his arms crossed, a smug, confident look on his face, occasionally sharing a laugh with another officer seated beside him. He had already spoken to the assistant district attorney, Mark Davies, a harried man in a rumpled suit who saw this as just another open and shut case of a cop-hating citizen getting what they deserved. All rise, the bailiff droned. The Honorable Judge Robert Thompson presiding. Judge Thompson was a stern, no-nonsense man in his late 60s, with a reputation for being impatient with frivolous arguments, but fair-minded when presented with credible facts. He scanned the room over his reading glasses, his expression one of perpetual weariness. Next case, he grumbled. The People versus Arthur Peterson. Charges are resisting arrest and felony assault on a police officer. How does the defendant plead? Sarah Jenkins stood up, her voice clear and stronger than it had been the day before. Not guilty, Your Honor. The ADA, Mark Davies, stood. Your Honor, the people feel this is a very straightforward case. Officer O'Malley is a 25-year veteran with a spotless record. His partner, Officer Miller, witnessed the unprovoked assault. We have two decorated officers versus the defendant. Given the violent nature of the charge against law enforcement, the people request bail be set at $50,000. A gasp came from Arthur. $50,000. It might as well have been $1 million. O'Malley smirked. This was going exactly as planned. Ms. Jenkins, the judge asked. Your Honor, Sarah began, her heart pounding. My client is a 72-year-old retired teacher with no criminal record whatsoever. He is a 40-year resident of the city. He is not a flight risk. The assault in question is a complete fabrication by the arresting officer to cover for his own misconduct. We request Mr. Peterson be released on his own recognizance. A fabrication, the ADA scoffed. Does counsel have any evidence to support this serious allegation against two police officers? We are in the process of gathering it, Your Honor, Sarah said carefully, sticking to the plan. We have also filed a motion to preserve all body cam and dash cam footage related to this arrest. The ADA shuffled his papers. We object to ROR, Your Honor. Assault on an officer is a serious threat to public order. Judge Thompson looked from the prosecutor to the elderly man in the orange jumpsuit. He was about to split the difference, as he usually did, and set a reasonable but still burdensome bail. I'm inclined to set bail at $10,000. It was at that precise moment that the large, heavy doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The sound made everyone turn. Framed in the doorway was David Peterson. He wasn't dressed in a rumpled suit like the ADA or a worn blazer like the public defender. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a conservative blue tie. He radiated an aura of calm, unshakable authority. Every eye in the room was drawn to him as he walked down the center aisle, his polished leather shoes making no sound on the worn floor. He didn't look at his father. He didn't look at O'Malley. His gaze was fixed solely on the bench. He stopped just behind the defense table. Judge Thompson squinted, annoyed at the interruption. Sir, this is a courtroom. You can't just walk in here. Take a seat in the gallery or leave. David gave a slight, respectful nod. My apologies for the interruption, Your Honor. My name is David Peterson. I am the defendant's son. O'Malley's smirk faltered slightly. He studied David, a flicker of something, annoyance, perhaps recognition, in his eyes. The son showing up was a minor complication, nothing more. The ADA sighed. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The defendant is represented by counsel. His family has no standing to address the court. I am aware, Mr. Davies, the judge said, his tone sharp. Sir, please take a seat. David did not move. Again, my apologies, Your Honor, but I am not here today solely as a son. I am here as a concerned party with information directly pertinent to this bail hearing and the integrity of this case. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his interest piqued despite his irritation. What kind of information? And what is your standing? David reached into his suit jacket and produced a small leather wallet. He flipped it open. The golden FBI shield inside seemed to catch every bit of light in the dim courtroom. Special Agent in Charge David Peterson, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division, he said, his voice ringing with quiet authority. And the information I have pertains to a federal crime committed by the arresting officer in this case. The filing of a false police report to deprive a citizen of his rights under color of law. A crime, Your Honor, that I personally witnessed evidence of this morning. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. The other cops in the gallery sat bolt upright. The ADA's jaw went slack. Sarah Jenkins allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. But the most dramatic reaction came from Officer Rick O'Malley. The smug, confident mask shattered, replaced by a ghastly pale shock. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. He stared at the man in the charcoal suit, then at the old man in the orange jumpsuit, the pieces crashing together in his mind with the force of a car wreck. The elderly black man he had slapped. The Sun. The FBI. It couldn't be. Judge Thompson stared at the credentials, then at David, his stern expression melting into one of utter seriousness. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes as if to make sure he wasn't dreaming. "Bailiff," the judge said, his voice a low rumble that commanded absolute attention. "Seal the courtroom. No one enters or leaves. Mr. Davies, Ms. Jenkins, Agent Peterson, approach the bench." As David walked past his father, he allowed their eyes to meet for a fraction of a second. In that glance, a lifetime of love and a silent promise passed between them. "I told you I would fix this." The hard karma O'Malley had been accumulating for 25 years had just walked through the courtroom door, and it was wearing a tailored suit. The sidebar conference was a tense, hushed affair. Judge Thompson, his face a grim mask, looked at the FBI agent standing before him. "Agent Peterson, you are making an incredibly serious claim in my courtroom. You'd better have more than just a hunch." "I do, Your Honor," David said calmly. He slid his phone across the bench to the judge. "This is video footage from a witness at the scene. I advise you to watch it in its entirety." The judge, the ADA Mark Davies, and Sarah Jenkins huddled around the small screen. David pressed play. The video began. The park setting was idyllic. The audio was crystal clear. They heard Arthur Peterson's polite, calm voice. Then they heard Officer O'Malley's escalating aggression. They heard him demand to search the bag. They heard Arthur's firm but respectful refusal. Then came the slap. The sound, even from the phone's tiny speaker, was sickeningly loud in the silent courtroom. Mark Davies, the prosecutor, physically recoiled, his face contorting in disbelief and horror. Judge Thompson's eyes narrowed into slits of cold fury. They watched as Arthur's glasses flew. They heard O'Malley's loud, clear, and utterly false declaration. "He tried to take a swing at me, Miller. You saw it." They heard Officer Miller's hesitant, mumbled agreement. The video ended. There was a dead silence at the bench. Judge Thompson slowly pushed the phone back toward David. He took a long, deep breath, then turned his gaze on the prosecutor. "Mr. Davies," the judge's voice was low, but it carried the weight of an impending avalanche. "You just stood in my courtroom and told me you had a straightforward case, based on the word of two decorated officers. Having seen this, would you like to amend your statement?" Mark Davies was pale, sweating. His career was flashing before his eyes. He had nearly prosecuted an innocent man based on a monstrous lie. Your Honor, I was not aware. This changes everything." "You're damn right it does," the judge hissed. He turned his attention back to the gallery, his eyes locking onto Rick O'Malley, who looked like a man watching his own execution. "Officer O'Malley, approach the bench." O'Malley's legs seemed to be made of lead as he walked the green mile from the gallery to the judge. His bravado had evaporated, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal fear. "Officer," Judge Thompson began, his voice dripping with ice, "I have just been shown evidence that suggests your sworn police report is a work of fiction, that you, in fact, are the one who committed an unprovoked assault, and that you coerced your rookie partner into lying for you. Do you have anything to say to that?" "Your Honor, that video it's taken out of context," O'Malley stammered, his voice cracking. "He was being non-compliant, aggressive." "Aggressive?" the judge roared, his voice suddenly booming through the courtroom. "I saw a senior citizen reading a book. I saw a bully with a badge lose his temper because his authority was questioned. I saw a crime, Officer O'Malley. And what's worse, I saw you try to cover that crime by committing another, and then another." David Peterson spoke. his voice cutting through the tension. "Your Honor, there's more. The witness who filmed this, Ms. Maria Sanchez, is waiting in the witness room, prepared to testify under oath. And she's not the only one." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of his next words land. "We also have a cooperating witness, Officer Kevin Miller. If O'Malley had been pale before, he was now translucent. He whipped his head around to look for his partner, but Miller was nowhere to be seen. "That's right, Officer O'Malley," David continued, his voice cold and precise. "After my office made a quiet inquiry last night, Officer Miller realized the jeopardy you had placed him in. He realized that lying for you was not worth his career, his freedom, and his soul. He came forward voluntarily just before this hearing began. He has already given a full, signed confession to federal investigators detailing how you assaulted Mr. Peterson without cause and then explicitly threatened him to coerce him into falsifying his report. His testimony corroborates the video evidence perfectly. It was the final devastating blow. The betrayal by his partner, the one he thought he had cowed into submission, was the nail in his coffin." O'Malley seemed to shrink, the air leaving his lungs, his entire life crumbling around him in the space of 5 minutes. Judge Thompson's face was stone. He pointed a trembling finger at O'Malley. "Richard O'Malley, I am holding you in contempt of this court. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented to me here today, I am ordering the bailiff to take you into custody. You are under arrest for perjury, filing a false police report, and felony assault under color of law." 2 bailiffs moved in, grabbing a stunned O'Malley by the arms. "You can't do this," he shrieked, his voice a pathetic whine. "I'm a cop." "Not anymore, you're not," the judge thundered. "Bailiffs, remove this disgrace from my courtroom." As O'Malley was dragged away, shouting and struggling, the judge turned his attention back to the matter at hand. "Mr. Davies?" The prosecutor cleared his throat, still shaken. "Your Honor, the people moved to dismiss all charges against the defendant, Mr. Arthur Peterson, with extreme prejudice." "Motion granted," the judge said immediately. "Mr. Peterson, you are free to go. This court offers its most profound apologies for the ordeal you have been subjected to. The record will reflect that you are and have always been an innocent man." He banged his gavel, the sound final and absolute. "Case dismissed." Arthur Peterson slowly stood up, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. They were not tears of shame or pain, but of overwhelming relief and pride. David walked to him, putting a firm, loving hand on his shoulder. "Let's go home, Dad," he said softly. The machine had been stopped. The lies had been shattered. But for David Peterson, the justice delivered in this courtroom was only the beginning. The karma O'Malley was due was far from paid in full. The fallout from Officer Rick O'Malley's courtroom implosion was not a quiet ripple. It was a media tsunami. Before the ink was dry on the dismissal order, the story had already been leaked. By the 6 o'clock news, it was the explosive lead story on every local channel. Maria Sanchez's crystal-clear video was the centerpiece, a viral testament to an abuse of power so blatant it was impossible to defend. The Chiron on Northwood's Channel 4 News read, "Courtroom chaos. Veteran cop arrested after FBI agent, son of elderly victim, reveals shocking video." The footage was everywhere. The polite elderly gentleman, the snarling officer, the sickening slap, and the pathetic, whining downfall. For Rick O'Malley, the karma was not a gentle course correction. It was a head-on collision with a freight train, a multi-car pileup from which he would never walk away. Stripped of his badge and gun before his feet even touched the pavement outside the courthouse, he was processed and booked into the very same Northwood County Jail, where Arthur Peterson had spent the previous night. The biting irony was lost on him, drowned out by a cacophony of panicked rage and disbelief. His former colleagues, the men he'd shared war stories and bitter jokes with for over 2 decades, now averted their eyes. He was no longer one of them. He was a liability, a walking embodiment of the scandal that now threatened them all. He had broken the cardinal rule. He got caught on camera, and worse, he had brought the full, terrifying weight of the federal government down upon their house. The first wall of his life to crumble was his home. His wife of 30 years, Janice, was in the living room, half watching the news when the story broke. She saw the familiar face of the park, then the familiar, brutish set of her husband's shoulders. She listened to his voice, dripping with a contempt she knew all too well. Then she saw the slap. A soundless gasp escaped her lips. It wasn't shock at his capacity for violence. She'd seen his temper before, but the public, undeniable proof of the ugly, bitter man he had become. This wasn't a flawed protector. This was a common bully. The subsequent footage of him being dragged from the courtroom, shrieking about his rights after violating an old man's, sealed it. The shame was a physical blow. That night, while he sat in a cell, Janice methodically packed 2 large suitcases. She paused only once, looking at a framed photo on the mantelpiece from 20 years ago. A younger, happier Rick, a smiling Janice, a son who now barely spoke to them. With cold finality, she turned the photo face down. She emptied half of their joint bank account and drove to her sister's house. The call to a divorce attorney already planned for the morning. The next wall to fall was his career. The Northwood Police Department, facing a public relations nightmare of epic proportions, moved with uncharacteristic speed. His union representative, a grizzled old cop named Pat Callahan, met him in a jailhouse interview room. "Ricky, it's bad," Callahan said, foregoing any pleasantries. "The video is indefensible. There's no context that makes it right." "He was resisting. He was mouthing off," O'Malley pleaded, his voice raspy. "He was a 72-year-old man reading a book, Rick." Callahan sighed, his expression grim. "The feds are involved. The chief is getting crucified. The mayor is screaming for blood. The union can't back you on this. We can't spend $1 million in legal fees to defend a case that's already been lost on every TV screen in the country. You're on your own." 2 days later, he was officially fired for gross misconduct and actions bringing the department into disrepute. His pension, just 2 years from being fully vested, was declared forfeit due to the criminal nature of his dismissal. The institution to which he had dedicated his life, the brotherhood he believed was sacrosanct, had amputated him like a gangrenous limb to save the whole. But David Peterson wasn't finished. The arrest of one rotten apple was merely treating a symptom. David was a man who targeted orchards. The day after the hearing, acting on the mountain of preliminary evidence, the United States Department of Justice, at the formal request of Special Agent in Charge David Peterson, launched a full-scale pattern or practice investigation into the Northwood Police Department's 17th precinct. The arrival of the FBI was a quiet invasion. A dozen agents in dark suits, led by David, walked into the precinct's bullpen during a shift change. An immediate tense silence fell over the room. These weren't friendly feds. This was an occupying force. Warrants were served, computers were imaged, personnel files were seized, and years of internal affairs records were boxed up as evidence. David's team systematically dismantled the fortress of lies O'Malley had built his career on. The 16 other resisting arrest cases they had flagged were pried open. They found other victims, ghosts from O'Malley's past who were suddenly given a voice. A young black man falsely accused of assault 3 years prior. A Latina woman bullied into a plea deal for interfering when she tried to film O'Malley harassing a teenager. A class action lawsuit was already taking shape, with the city's attorneys bracing for a multi-million-dollar impact. Officer Kevin Miller, the rookie, became the linchpin of the government's case. In exchange for his full and truthful cooperation, he was granted immunity from prosecution. His debriefing took 6 hours in a sterile federal building conference room. He recounted every detail of the incident and the subsequent threat from O'Malley, his voice shaking at first, then growing stronger with each truth he told. He was officially fired from the Northwood PD but was permitted to resign. His career in law enforcement was over, but as he signed his formal confession, he felt a profound weight lift from his shoulders. He left the state a week later, a young man who had learned a lifetime's worth of lessons about courage and cowardice in a single terrible afternoon. 6 months later, a gaunt and broken Rick O'Malley stood before a federal judge for sentencing. He had pleaded guilty to all charges, hoping for a shred of mercy that never came. Dressed in a drab, oversized prison jumpsuit, he looked nothing like the swaggering, powerful officer he once was. The judge, a formidable woman named Eleanor Hayes, looked down at him from the bench with undisguised contempt. "Mr. O'Malley," she said, her voice echoing in the solemn courtroom, "you took an oath to uphold the law. You were entrusted with a badge and a gun, symbols of public trust and immense power. You twisted that trust into a weapon of personal prejudice. You did not just assault Mr. Arthur Peterson, you assaulted the very principles this nation purports to stand for. That you then tried to destroy his life with a web of lies and coerce a junior officer to join your conspiracy speaks to a corruption of character that is truly staggering. Men like you are why communities fear the police instead of trusting them. The bill for your betrayal of the public trust has come due. She sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison. There would be no special treatment, no cop wing in a minimum security facility. He was designated a general population inmate, stripped of the last vestige of the identity he had so thoroughly disgraced. On a crisp autumn afternoon, a full year after the arrest, David and Arthur Peterson sat on that same bench in Lincoln Park. The air was cool, and the leaves on the ancient oaks were a riot of red and gold. The park was peaceful, reclaimed. Arthur was reading as always, but he seemed more at ease, his quiet dignity fully restored. That poor young officer, Miller, Arthur mused, breaking the comfortable silence. I wonder what became of him. He's working as a paramedic in Oregon, David replied, having kept tabs. He's saving lives instead of ruining them. He made the right choice in the end. Arthur nodded, satisfied. He looked at his son, at the quiet strength in his profile as he watched the ducks on the pond. The enemies you've made in this city, it worries me, David. It's part of the job, Dad, David said. He built his house with gasoline and rotting wood. All I did was hold up a match and let the world see the inferno that was already waiting to happen. This was never just about him. It was about all the people who sat on this bench before you, who didn't have a video, who didn't have a voice, who didn't have a son in the FBI to call. This was for them too. Arthur closed his book and placed his warm, wrinkled hand on his son's. The touch was filled with a universe of pride, love, and gratitude. You're a good man, David Peterson, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You seek a difficult kind of justice. David squeezed his father's hand. The system wasn't fixed. The world wasn't perfect. But here on this bench, under the golden canopy of the autumn trees, a small but significant piece of it had been set right. A monster had been caged, a conspiracy had been unraveled, and a hard, unforgettable lesson had been delivered. Karma, like justice, may have a long and winding road, but its final destination is always the truth. That single ugly slap in the park set off a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. It wasn't just about one racist cop getting what he deserved. It was a story about the systems that protect men like him and the courage it takes to tear those systems down. It's a reminder that true strength isn't found in a badge or a uniform, but in dignity, truth, and the unwavering resolve to fight for what's right. Officer O'Malley thought he was untouchable, but he forgot the most important rule. You never know who you're messing with. He didn't just assault an elderly man. He awoke a sleeping giant of justice. If this story of karma and accountability resonated with you, and if you believe that the powerful should always be held to answer for their actions, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to see that justice is possible. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true-to-life stories where the bullies finally meet their match. Thank you for listening.